Everyone, this is a politics show, and I have been talking mostly about COVID-19, and COVID-19 is politics based. Currently, politicians right now are giving a briefing about the best and worst case scenarios, and we're going to get to that soon. But I want to talk about, not Secretary Pompeo, I want to talk about the wage subsidy legislation being delayed while the Liberals and Tories negotiate over virtual parliament. It's interesting because the Tories want a sitting in the House, even if it's a reduced sitting to maintain personal distancing, but they want people to be able to have the debates in the House of Commons. And the Liberals want a virtual parliament, right? So here's the article. Critical wage subsidy legislation. Well, what I was going to say is I think it's interesting that the news is lumping that argument and saying it's blocking this wage subsidy legislation. I don't think it's blocking it. I think that it's a necessary conversation. It's like you have to figure out how we're going to solve the problems before we solve the problems, right? It's not even chicken or egg. It's a necessary procedural thing to go through. You can't run a law office in a way that is a way you've never done it before without having to set the procedures in place. How are we going to get these things signed if you can't sign it in person or whatever? How are we going to, send out the files or whatever? And a lot of offices were working towards paperless anyway. But this forced movement to paperless or to a new way of doing things requires procedures, and it also requires testing, and it talks about testing and the problems that were encountered anyway. So I think that the news is oversimplifying because it's a complicated problem, right? Like it's not just so easy to say, yeah, agree to the $75 billion or $73 billion package, and move on. It's missing the really, really fundamental point of this is a necessary conversation that has to happen. We have one way to make laws in this country. We have one way to roll out $73 billion packages in this country, and that way isn't virtually. Right? So before we do it, if the Liberals want to do it virtually, they have procedures they have to do. Right? The Conservatives, if anything, are offering a path to a faster passage of this bill because they don't have to worry about setting up the necessary underpinnings of this virtual parliament. They can just go in, have social distancing or whatever you want to call it, physical distancing, and actually get it done. So it's oversimplification by the newspaper, in my opinion. Okay, here we go. Critical wage subsidy legislation is being held up as the Conservatives and Liberals spar over just how the House of Commons will hold the government to account during the COVID-19 crisis. The big sticking point is that Liberals want a virtual parliament while the Conservatives want to have a parliament come back in person, but with reduced numbers and regular sittings. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the government welcomes the scrutiny of the opposition but wants to convene a virtual parliament with more participants. It's important that parliamentarians from every corner of the country, not just those within driving distance of Ottawa, should be able to weigh in on the workings of our democracy. That's why we're looking at virtual models for doing that, he said. In a letter released Wednesday, Speaker Anthony Rota, who's been asked to explore virtual parliament, concluded a model could be up within 4 weeks. Now, initially, this is me, I thought 4 weeks sounded like a long time. Zoom meeting, hello, you call Microsoft? Not really. There's a lot of security issues with Zoom. It's not encrypted end to end, so there's issues with that. And the Canadian government actually has rules about that, so that's why they don't use Zoom meetings. Anyway, moving on. There are complications, and they're pointed out in the article. But initially, I was like, 4 weeks? That seems like a really long time. Apparently that would be realistic. And possibly the problems that they introduce here wouldn't even be solved within 4 weeks. Okay, back to this. He said the House of Commons staff are working on the idea and doing everything they can to make it possible. The details of the virtual parliament are still unclear. Since Parliament last sat, the House of Commons Finance and Health Committees have both convened by teleconference regularly to discuss the crisis. But like any teleconference, there have been technical issues, participants who can't be heard, as well as problems with simultaneous translation. Conservatives say they are concerned the same technical issues will confound the virtual parliament as well. Liberals speaking on background said they're also concerned an in-person parliament would send the wrong message about the need for social distancing and risk exposing senior cabinet members who are needed in this crisis to COVID-19. However, Conservatives House Leader Candice Bergen said there is no reason the Commons can't sit in a reduced form. Quote, Ministers hold daily press conferences in a room steps from the House of Commons. The House of Commons is a large room that can allow for physical distancing, she said on Twitter. If ministers can hold press conferences safely, there's no reason for them or the PM to avoid accountability in the House. She said Conservatives want Parliament to have a meaningful role. The wage subsidy proposal will cover up to 75% of an employee's wages, allowing employers to keep them on payroll. The Liberals had a wage subsidy in the first financial package for COVID-19 relief, but it was much more limited, and new legislation is required for the broader package. Now, I want to point out, 75% of nothing, still nothing, right? If your business is shut down, and let's say in January and February, you made, let's say, $20,000 each month, okay? And then March and April, you made, let's say, $10,000 in March because you were open half the month, and April you've made nothing because you've been closed. So 75% of nothing is nothing. The business is waiting, right? Waiting for bailout money or something, right? And so I think this is not enough, not targeted enough. I don't know, but I don't know that this is going to work to do what the Liberals are planning for it to do. I know that they've opened up all sorts of allowances and all sorts of stuff to make it cover as broad a number of people as possible. But again, I don't know if it's going to solve the problem that it's trying to solve, right? I just don't know. We'll have to see. Here's CP24. Here's a little jailhouse run. Yeah, it's interesting because I started here. I started at the violent crimes due to COVID-19, and I worked backwards to here. And well, this is interesting, right? I mean, this was published today. I found the articles in a different order, but these are all published with close around now. Today, yesterday. Anyway, CP24 is reporting criminal lawyers pushing to have clients avoid jail time due to rising COVID-19 cases. The number of COVID-19 cases in prison is rising, prompting Canada's criminal lawyers and an inmate advocacy group to call on the federal and provincial governments to reduce the number of people in the institutions. The number of cases jumped from 21 to 35 on Wednesday at 4 institutions in Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. Now, I just want to point out, I've been reading a lot of news lately that talks about just like an advocacy group that's talking, like this one's an inmate advocacy group. Others are immigration advocacy groups or whatever. In my scroll through Twitter, it's like, oh, we can't do X as advocacy group. We can't do Y because another advocacy group says so. And I find it really strange how much of our news is made up of people who, it doesn't take much to become an advocacy group. It takes a website, maybe a phone number, and you slap your name on it and you say, I'm the advocacy group for blah. And all of a sudden newspapers are citing your advocacy group. There's a lot wrong with Canadian media these days. And I just want to point that out. Anyway, I don't want to endorse this. I don't want to necessarily say that this advocacy group is right, but the newspaper positions it that way. Okay? Anyway, back to this. So they jumped from 21 to 35 on Wednesday in institutions in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. I scroll down. The whole concept has been flipped on its... Okay. The virus has been diagnosed in 49 prison guards at Port Cartier, Joliet, and Don Cana institutions in Quebec, and in Ontario's Grand Valley Institution. Criminal Lawyers Association have set out an affidavit for its 1,600 members to use in court from Dr. Aaron Orkin, medical doctor of the COVID-19 Assessment Center at the St. Joseph's Healthcare Centre in Toronto. John Hale, vice president with the association, said the virus is a new factor in sentencing and needs to be taken into account. The whole concept has been flipped on its head now with COVID-19 because a person may be in more danger, may be more of a danger to the community in the sense of a health risk if they're kept in a highly populated jail where the disease can spread. Now, it took me a minute to understand that. I was thinking somebody in like a long-term jail sentence, 12-month or 15-month or, a long-term jail sentence. But there are people who spend like weekends in jail. And so going to jail for the weekend maybe doesn't make sense in this context. So that's what that statement means. But at first I was like, that seems very, very strange logic. Like putting this offender in prison constitutes a higher risk because, right? But if they're a weekend person, if they're somebody who's going to work during the week, then yeah, it would. But for the majority of people, that's not true, I don't think. How many people does that apply to? Anyway, it seems interesting. Back to this. Experience with cruise ships, hospitals, and long-term care facilities shows us that it is extremely difficult, near impossible, to limit a coronavirus outbreak in congregate living settings, especially those with close quarters, shared toilets, and eating facilities, or service personnel moving between people confined to their rooms, the document says. It's extremely likely that COVID-19 will arrive in nearly every correction facility in Canada, which means almost all inmates will be exposed in one way or another, it says. The only available method to sustainably reduce the resulting infections and deaths is therefore to reduce the population in those settings. At the very least, the federal and provincial governments should eliminate double bunking and get the elderly who have chronic health conditions out of the institutions because physical distancing is virtually impossible, she said in an interview. I think there needs to be an immediate removal of people who can be safely managed in the community and placed in the community to depopulate or reduce the numbers in prisons as quickly as possible. I scroll down a little bit. In fact, Ontario, BC, Newfoundland, and Labrador, and the Northwest Territories have diverted hundreds from jails or granted them temporary absences. Offenders who serve weekend sentences have also been released in many provinces. So that's where the weekend thing came from. And I scroll down to the end. It would be better to get the vulnerable people out before the virus contaminates the prison that they're in. It's a different set of issues if the virus is in the prison and you're taking people out. Yes, definitely. I'm glad they mentioned that as well. Here's the medium part, the part that makes you think, oh, well, releasing these people is a terrible idea. What are you doing? Or one reason for releasing these people is a terrible idea. CTV News is reporting, and this is on April 4th. So this is the first chronologically released article of the three. The last one was the second. Okay. Ontario releases more than 1,900 inmates, many with nowhere to go. The province of Ontario has been releasing hundreds of inmates as of late over public safety concerns due to COVID-19, but some say that these men and women are being left with nowhere to go. John was recently let out of the Sudbury jail after serving a sentence for assault. He also had a difficult time struggling with his addictions. Quote, I was in the Sudbury jail for about a month, and they released me on a conditional sentence, 12 months, said John. It was due to COVID-19. They said it was a light sentence due to my previous history. He's asked that we not use his last name or identify him out of concerns for his own safety. According to John, there wasn't much in the way of physical distancing until that point. He'd lived with a cell partner, and there was up to 16 people who lived on the range. It was nerve-wracking thinking about the virus because you never know, right? The difficult part of his release was finding out there wasn't much in the way of available help on the outside, particularly when it came to his rehabilitation. Quote, there's really no support. Everything's shut down, even social assistance. It's hard to get in there, right? John says he still has no idea where to go. Quote, they need to offer more to the inmates here because they kick you out on the street. You have nowhere to go. They expect you to follow the rules and whatnot, but they make it hard, he explains. The province says between March 13th and April 1st, the total population of adult inmates in its correctional system decreased by 1,901 in a bid to preserve public safety. Okay, and here's the last one. This is released April 8th. This was second. This was released April 9th. This one was released this morning. This one is the second one. Okay, judges released growing number accused of violent crimes due to COVID-19 fears. Right. So on one hand, they're releasing people onto the street who have nowhere to go, so they're going to break curfew or they're going to go to shelters, or if there are shelters. And I've seen other things about that from the Rebel, but now they're also releasing violent people. So this is, strange, right? One is the accused getaway driver for a recent Toronto murder attempt. Another allegedly pistol whipped and tasered two in Ottawa over a drug debt. A third was allegedly involved in a Toronto strip mall shooting. A growing number of suspects arrested on serious criminal charges have been ordered released from custody in recent weeks by judges concerned about the spread of COVID-19 in Canada's prisons. These are extraordinarily dire times, a judge wrote Monday in a decision ordering the release of a man accused of firing a bullet through his ex-girlfriend's apartment window in Hamilton, Ontario. Although the courts have effectively shut down due to the pandemic, they have heard from detainees arguing they should be released from custody because of the new coronavirus. A flurry of court decisions suggests that even those accused of violent crimes are winning release. As one judge wrote, the pandemic had reordered the usual calculus. Okay, and I've already read a lot of this, but isn't the positioning just really interesting? And it's not like the criminals are listening to the stay-home order, right? Here's from last night, 10:11 p.m. One person dead, says 680 News, after shooting near St. Clair and Christie, right? One person has died after a shooting in the St. Clair Avenue West and Christie Street area on Wednesday night. Police responded to reports of multiple shots being fired in the St. Clair West area, right? So those criminals, they're not social distancing, or maybe they are. Are you social distancing with a handgun, right? Illegal or not? Or did they have a hunting rifle? right? Did the hunters come in and have this shooting happen? Yeah? No? Right. So it's just, I mean, all of these moves to protect people, does it make it worse, right? Would this person have died? Who knows? I don't know if this is an escaped or a released former convict or not. I have no idea, but could be. Could be. Here is, they're actually doing the press conference now. It's 10:06 a.m. on the 9th, and this is City Toronto reporting feds to reveal projections for Canadian deaths from COVID-19. Federal officials, will be holding a technical briefing revealing their best and worst case projections for the number of Canadians who are likely to get infected by the deadly virus, the number who are likely to die, and how long it will take to contain it. Late Wednesday, the government announced that it will also release this morning its national projections for the scope and duration of the health crisis. The federal government has been under pressure to release national projections, as other countries have done. Trudeau has said that national numbers would be coming out soon, but has repeatedly stressed that projections aren't predictions. The Canadians can change the trajectory of this disease, the disease, by heeding orders to stay home and keeping physical distance from one another. Now, I would love to see the science. Please, if you know where this is, link it because I'm interested. The science that says this is fixing this. The science that says that after a specific period of time we can reopen. I've heard Wuhan's reopened every week for the last 3 or 4, and every time I've gone to the TomTom traffic monitor thing, and it's been not true because the traffic is still at 3% of usual, and even it compares to 2019, 2018, and same time last year, and it's nowhere near normal. So if anybody's got any indication that this is a viable plan, that blowing up our economy and everyone staying home is a viable long-term plan that's backed up by some kind of science, I'd love to see it. I would love to, because it seems that that's the plan. And it seems that, they keep saying that they're listening to the best science. And it seems that the best science continues to lie to us with regard to masks and with regard to effectiveness of treatments and stuff. So it seems a little weird, doesn't it? Just seems odd to rely on this, everybody stay home, nobody go to work, and no, those treatments don't work. We're not going to test them. Seems weird. Just seems strange to me. And okay, to be fair, they are testing them. They are testing them in old age homes. They're doing trials. But the only way to try those drugs for COVID-19 is to get on a trial. You can't just have a doctor prescribe it. That's not allowed. So that's what I'm talking about. Isn't that strange? I think that's odd. And here's the last little bit of news. Twisting and turning, 17 minutes. Here we go. Global News is reporting officials warned Canada couldn't enforce coronavirus quarantine for travelers from China. Federal health officials appear to have warned in early February, as the novel coronavirus spread globally, that Canada did not have the resources to enforce a quarantine order on travelers returning from China's Hubei province. Federal, provincial, and territorial health departments agreed not to order tens of thousands of travelers arriving in Canada from China to quarantine in February in order to reduce pressure on public health resources. Isn't that strange? Because what happened instead is the economy got shut down and the pressure on our public health resources is increased massively, and we don't have the PPE equipment because these guys sent it to China. Isn't that strange? Back to this. According to a memo addressed to Health Minister Patty Haydu, sorry about that, and signed by the Public Health Agency of Canada, President and Chief Public Health Officer. The memo was included in roughly 1,000 pages of documents shared by the public health officials with the Federal Health Committee last month. Okay, there's more to this, but I'm not going to read it all. But fundamentally, their inaction early on has led to this disastrous result. This is a disastrous result. People did predict this. Taiwan avoided this by having very, very strict airport screenings and shutting down air travel from infected areas. We're still allowing flights from infected areas. We're still landing flights from China today. So it just seems disingenuous, right? To have people to claim that, the best science says, I'd love to see it. And while still landing people from infected areas, how could you possibly contain this thing? How could you possibly expect to contain this thing if you're landing flights from China? I don't understand the rationale one little bit. There's not even a pathway to, I guess if you looked at it like this. No, there's nothing. It makes zero sense. It's stupid. It is irrational. It is incompetent. It is not doing the very, very bare minimum to keep Canadians safe. If you said, we're trying to stop this virus and we stopped all flights from the infected areas, then I would believe that you were actually trying to keep Canadians safe. But if you say we've done everything we can, now stay in your homes while these Chinese nationals arrive on planes to major airports across the country, I say you're not doing nearly enough. Not nearly enough. And that's enough out of me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day. Wash your hands.